Chapter 18 of Psychopomp Drive. Written by Janeen Leese-Taylor. Read aloud by SkyAsimaru. Chapter 18 Caged. Finley had removed his jacket with shaking hands, struggling to undo the shiny silver buttons before he laid the cloth over one of the young victims. He hovered just inside the doorway to the meerkat habitat, watching the volunteers as they unboxed supplies from the stockroom nearby. Even Sassy, in her infinite chirpiness, had quietened down to little more than a soft, worried mewl.
"I had forgotten just how small children are,"
she breathed. The school children crammed together under the makeshift shelter, many of whom were injured and covered in dust and dirt from the blasts. Finley observed from a distance as Thorn and two other volunteers rushed between them, handing out emergency provisions and juice cartons from their stolen stash. An older woman, one that Finley assumed must have been a teacher or a classroom assistant, was drinking lukewarm tea out of a thermos. Her hands were trembling as she brought the tiny cup up to her lips and took another sip. "Is everyone here?" Thorn called out to the group as her eyes darted towards each of them in turn. Her lips moved as she counted the numbers in her head. "Anyone missing a buddy?"
"I think Jason went to the toilet, miss,"
one of the children answered, sticking her hand into the air.
"He didn't come out after all the banging."
Panic briefly overtook Thorn's expression before she quickly schooled it away again, leaning close to one of the other volunteers to whisper in her ear. When the girl nodded, Thorn headed for the rear entrance of the building and disappeared through the gap between two fractured planes of glass. Finley followed her around the side of the building, keeping his distance. "Where are you going, Thorn?" he hissed under his breath, moving in against the ruins of the meerkat display. Thorn was walking at a crouch, peering up through the opening in the ceiling as the telltale buzz of the corruptors approached. She moved lightly on the balls of her feet, trying to keep her body low as she pressed her back into the cover of the artificial stone. The shadow overhead passed quickly, and she let out a breath, continuing towards the open path ahead. Finley recognized the spot from their previous visits. On the wall opposite, murals of lions and giraffes had been painted with bright colors, text bubbles filled with arrows that directed visitors to the jungle-themed loos beyond. Finley watched as Thorn's eyes darted from the bathroom doorway to the sky and back down again. He knew what she was thinking. The space from one place to the other was vulnerable, open to attack from above. There was nowhere to hide. He watched the love of his life steel herself, taking a deep breath in and out again.
"Come on, Thorn, think about this,"
he urged her silently.
"You know you can't risk this."
The spirit inside his reaper flared to life in his hands nervously.
"Finn,"
Sassy started quietly.
"You and I both know it is not a good idea to be this close to a living human."
"We can't just let her go out there alone, Sassy,"
he argued.
"Finn,
I have to try,
he growled, and followed the pink-haired Thorn out into the bright sunlight. The temperature dipped in the air around them, and Finley charged blindly forward to stop the advance of the smoke-like whisperers with a powerful slash of his axe. Purple magic cut through the invading hollows, and they spun through the air, circling back as they changed their target.
No, you don't!
Finley snapped as he leapt in front of Thorn's retreating back. Panic seemed to race through her suddenly, making her sprint the final few meters to the bathroom door. She pushed in with both hands, slamming the door back against the influx of muttering corruptors. The Amarini behind her batted one creature after another out of his way, watching as even more of them gathered in his peripheries. Latching onto his bare arm, their eyes glowed brightly as they revealed a dozen hidden mouths, wide and filled with sharp, pointed teeth, like a child's drawing of a monster. The spirits chomped down onto his skin, their tendrils spreading along his chest and shoulder on either side, as the thick, viscous material began to cover him completely. Pain flared bright behind his eyes, and Finley brought the blade of his reaper down to tear the beasts from his body, pulling hard against the anchor of the slime and teeth. The corruptor bounced along the ground, where it squelched and flopped, legs sprouting from all sides of it as it dragged itself along the earth like a soggy arachnid. He sprinted after it, raising Sassy for another blow, when Thorn's terrified screams made him change his trajectory. Spinning to face her in the sand, a gust of wind hurried past him on both sides, scattering rubble across the vacant yard. He maneuvered himself in her direction, projecting himself forward with as much speed as he could muster. Thorn stood in front of the missing child with her arms outstretched, gritting her teeth and staring back at the dark shape of a woman. The figure advanced on her slowly, and she retreated from it with fear in her eyes. She pushed the little boy behind her frantically, shoving him in the direction she had come from. "Go to the others! Go! Go!" The boy sprinted towards the meerkat house, his gasping breaths disappearing past Finley and around the next corner. The shadowy being smiled as she turned her attention to Thorn, bright eyes scanning the smaller woman's body.
My, you are a pretty one, aren't you?
She cooed. And so brave, a real soldier. "Who the heck are you?" Thorn demanded, gritting her teeth in anger. "Why are you doing this?"
Ungrateful human, you should be thanking me,
the destroyer answered, wrinkling her nose in distaste. Her dark hair was glowing all around her like ribbons of silk, framing her face.
Your people were growing too quiet. Without conflict, you will all rot and decay. I am merely helping you to discover your anger again.
"Fuck you and your cryptic bullshit!" Thorn spat, narrowing her eyes defiantly. "You leave these kids alone! They didn't do a single thing to you!" The destroyer lifted a glowing hand into the air, forming a ball of red and purple magic that sparked and jittered as if she had captured lightning within a bubble. Thorn's eyes widened as she stared at it, the colors reflected across her dark skin. Maka chuckled to herself and twisted her palm to face the human before her. It's a shame to have to kill someone who has such fire. Oh well. Her hand opened outwards with a sudden pop, the action sending the blast of light soaring in the young woman's direction. Thorn, get down! The human's pink hair caught the fierce radiance of the spell as she turned towards her name, her eyes widening as she was scooped up into the man's arms and whisked away. The attack knocked Finley off his feet, and they rolled into the cover of the next building over, the roof caving inwards on top of them with a loud crash. Finley felt the wood and stone damaging the body of his doll, but he held strong over her, arms shaking as the materials hit against his exposed back. He winced at the pain, closing his eyes and hissing through his teeth as he braced. His arms tensed, his locked elbows threatening to bow as he held himself over her like a shield of blood and bone. When the remnants of the blast began to settle, he leaned in close to the woman's face beneath him, whispering, "Keep very still." He could feel Thorn's affirming nod against his shoulder as the dark shapes of the hollows passed by over their heads. Finley held his breath and pulled his tail in against his knees, hoping that the destroyer wouldn't be able to feel the pounding of Thorn's heart like he could right now. After a few minutes, he allowed his ears to stretch up and take in their surroundings. No whispers or mutterings greeting them from the space beyond, and only sparse light was making its way through the rubble to them. He extended a hand upwards and pushed the collapsed wood aside, freeing up the space to stand. Shale and brick crumbled to pieces alongside them, cracking and fracturing across the top of the splintering wood. The buildings that served as the cafe and visitor center had been blown wide open, sending their contents all over the zoo's grounds. He inspected his hands and face, assessing the damage. If he had still been alive, there would have been broken bones and lots of blood loss. Right now, though, he could only see scratches to the surface of the doll, burns along the fringes of his uniform. Where there would have been blood, only dust clung to the dark fabric. Thorn coughed loudly as she reached for his hand, using his solid grip to pull herself to her feet. Pieces of insulation tumbled from her long, dyed hair, and the sand on her dark skin blended in with the light-toned freckles speckled along her eyes and nose. All of a sudden, he was surrounded by her brightness, her familiar smell of citrus and freshly brewed coffee beans. He could make out every one of the sun-warmed highlights in her hair as her eyes settled on his, widening in disbelief.
"Finn," she whispered. It really was you I saw."
You called her name, Finley,
Sassy reminded him.
The spell!
"Hi, Thorn," he replied with an awkward half-smile. Long time no see.
To be continued in Chapter 19.